Akuma vs Shao Kahn is not an episode that anyone in my friend group was particularly looking forward to. Everyone's reaction ranged from, well, I guess the animation could be cool, to, why isn't Akuma fighting literally anyone else? Sorry, Sai. A boring matchup on its own doesn't mean that I won't like the episode though. After all, I had no stakes in Dio vs Alucard, and that's ended up somewhere on my top 15 favourite episodes ever. But before I go over the new episode, I gotta keep up the tradition that I've only loosely stuck to for the latter half of this season, and cover Akuma and Shao Kahn's previous episodes. I ramble about them both for way longer than I expected to, so let's not waste any more time drawing this intro out.
He's an unstoppable human holocaust.
Wow, the second episode of the show is one that I actually like upon revisiting? Huh. I mean, that's entirely because of my leniency towards Season 1, especially the earlier episodes, but still. It has all the flaws you'd expect from a Season 1 episode, not just in the fight but in the analysis as well. It's super short, doesn't go into the characters at all, and instead focuses on just their power sets. But there's the expected Season 1 charm, and I like a few of the jokes. The finger painting joke's alright, I like Wiz being clueless on how to pronounce the big energy geyser move. Boomstick calling his future child Shungo Kusatsu is a joke about a family member besides his father, so it gets points for that. The conclusion has a neat visual gag comparing Liu Kang to Akuma, and above all else, Akuma's rundown contains the legendary phrase, "That's right, Boomstick." And it's the line I laughed the hardest at all episode because I have given myself brain rot. Listing these all out has made me realise that almost everything I like is in Akuma's section. Sung's was kinda boring. It had an almost funny joke where Boomstick wishes he could shapeshift with some horrible implications, and then Rogue vs Wonder Woman happening right after retroactively shot it down from a decent enough joke to fucking agonising. Akuma really has to carry everything in the analysis, but then Wiz says unstoppable human holocaust and ruins it. And the animation, for Season 1 standards, especially for the second episode of the series, is actually pretty good. Of course, yeah, again, this is Season 1, so it goes without saying there's jank, the sprites clash horribly, it's super short, yada yada. And while that does suck, especially given it means Shang Tsung only gets to turn into 2 other people, not even coming close to the full potential his shapeshifting provides, what they are able to include is pretty enjoyable. Akuma takes the lead early on with his hyper-aggressive fighting style, his big Go Hadouken even deals the most damage shown by the health bars, which makes perfect sense. Speaking of the health bars, I mean, I don't like them, but I think they're used much better here than in Samus vs. Fett. It never has one of those quiet moments where you're supposed to think, oh shit, did this character die? Well, they still have a good amount of their health left. It fits a fighting game episode better, it reflects the back and forth of the battle way better, they even wait until the reveal of Sung's death at the end to drop his health bar down to 0, which is pretty cool. But I'm getting ahead of myself talking about the ending right now. After Akuma's initial onslaught, Sung turns into Scorpion to catch him off guard, and Akuma, for some reason, doesn't do anything to avoid the spear. He just stands there and takes it to be polite. Sung throws 2 whole attacks as Scorpion before changing back, which is a shame, but one of them invokes Dan Forden, so all's forgiven. Sung extends the combo by turning back into himself and keeping Akuma airborne with his flaming skulls, but Akuma's able to turn the tables on him when he gets knocked close with a demon flip. That's a cool bit of choreography. Sung gets the upper hand with some sucker punches, starts draining Akuma's soul, which puts him at his first state of significant advantage, so Akuma responds by getting serious and dropping one of his strongest attacks to close the gap again. And then the finale where Sung turns into Akuma, I would be lying out my ass if I said this didn't make me pop off when I first saw the episode back in 2011. And even now, the final battle in the air set to the Gouken vs Ryu music from Street Fighter 4 is great. I wish it did more to make me unsure of who would win because they'd never actually swap sides or anything, you always know Sung's the one on the left. But even still, the final bit where Sung goes for the big fuck off geyser, but his lack of experience in Akuma's form giving Akuma all the time he needs to get back up and just barely pull off the Raging Demon as a finisher. For how early on in the show this was, this ending goes harder than it has any right to. I'm really surprised this episode still holds up as one I like, but it does. The way this fight incorporates their different fighting styles with Akuma's overly aggressive rushdowns and Sung's cunning letting him land some sneak attacks and save himself from being overwhelmed, the music, the fact that outside of the Scorpion Spear the fight never feels dull or slow, the general Season 1 charm of the entire package, I really enjoyed myself. It doesn't get any higher on my Season 1 ranking than before, but I'd still give it a 7 out of 10. A low 7 mind you, but a 7 nonetheless. Now let's discuss an episode that's better in pretty much every way.
Master Bison, he's our hero, gonna take pollution down to 0.
That's right, Boomstick.
Okay, well, not every way. But this is still an improvement over Akuma vs. Sung regardless. I mean, the fact that I don't have to be super lenient towards it to get it anywhere above a 3 out of 10 should tell you that from the start. But before I get into how much I enjoyed this episode though, I surprisingly have a history with this episode that I don't with many others, and I never had the chance to put that in the script for my remastered Season 2 video, so I'm just gonna go over that here instead. Not everyone's going to want to hear about that though, so skip to this timestamp if you just want to hear me talk about the episode. I first started on Death Battle when the most recent episode was Zelda vs Peach, and Shao Kahn vs M. Bison is the first matchup I remember actively wanting before it was announced. Besides Goku vs Superman of course, but that's cheating. I remember being excited for Pikachu, but I didn't know who Blanka was. I thought Batman vs Spider-Man could be cool, but I don't remember super popping off for its announcement or anything. Link vs Cloud never grabbed me, and He-Man vs Lion-O I had zero interest in because I didn't know who either of them were. This is the first time I experienced that dopamine rush you get on the rare occasion that one of your dream matches gets confirmed. As far as I can remember, the only other matchups to get me this excited upon their announcement were Tracer vs Scout, Wario vs DDD, and Mob vs Tatsumaki. Individual characters have also reached that level like Genos and Poe, but they always have to do the heavy lifting when I don't care as much about their opponents. Kahn vs Bison wasn't like that. I specifically wanted to see these two fight each other. I did care much more about Kahn since this was at the peak of my Mortal Kombat 9 craze, while I still haven't ever really gotten into Street Fighter, but still. And then when the episode came out, I loved it. For the entire run of Season 2, this stood out as one of my favourites solely because of that prior connection. But that's enough about my taste from when I was barely in the double digits of age, with amazing takes like Metal Sonic vs Zero is one of my favourite Sprite episodes, and I like both Goku vs Superman parts about the same. Doesn't matter how I used to feel about it, what matters for the purposes of this video is how I feel about it now. It's no longer one of my favourites, but it's still really fun to revisit. The analysis is packed with early series charm, but in a completely different way to Akuma vs Shang Tsung. It's far more competently done and is entertaining all throughout rather than just having a few good lines here and there. We get info on their stories, their power sets, and unlike Season 1, what they're both like as characters. All of that's coupled with plenty of jokes that I liked, Khan's segment especially. Bringing up how he should use his hammer to play whack-a-mole, the comparison between brainwashing and a night in Vegas, the bullying of supplementary Mortal Kombat material with both this bit about the dragon and this line in the sidebar. I really like how Shao Kahn's analysis is done up until the last line where Boomstick gets horny over Kitana and Sindel. Bison's isn't bad by any means either. It has less that stuck with me in terms of jokes, but there is that one iconic bit with Boomstick singing a Bison-themed version of the Captain Planet theme. I love that when he sees Wiz doesn't give him a reaction, he interrupts him in hopes of forcing one out of him, and then Wiz just proceeds to ignore him again. That's great. I love the clip they play from the Street Fighter movie as well. I find the end clip funny. There's a handful of almost reverse flash to your grins that made me chuckle. And there's something just so special about how they call Psycho Power one of the most destructive energies in fiction, and then all they say for it is that it can one-shot a regular human, as if that is not bog standard for the most basic attacks of literally every character they have ever used. Oh wait, yeah, actually that's the one thing I think Bison's analysis does better than Khan's: give us anything resembling versus stuff. I don't expect Season 2 to have stats and presentation figured out, especially this early on, but Bison at least gets something with surviving being crushed by a building. Khan isn't really given anything to place him on any specific tier of power. I really like the animation as well. The setup's really funny to me, and based on the preview for Akuma vs Khan, I'd surprisingly like the start to this one better. We get to actually see Bison interrupt Khan's tournament, who does not wait for an entire fight to take place before he intervenes. He immediately jumps to action, and this jump here looks way less janky than Akuma's one. Fucking hell. And I just love how the Tarkatans get fucking obliterated. Bison grabs one who screams in pain and is abruptly cut off before he just evaporates, and Khan flattens the other one into a paste for no reason other than he's just a massive asshole. Also, I should mention the sprites clashing. It doesn't look great, but the cleaner overall look of the animation makes this not nearly as bad as Akuma vs Sung in that regard. In fact, generally, I'd say this is the most pleasant looking of the 3 episodes I'm going to be talking about today. Oh, we will get there. The start of the fight has a lot that I like. Bison spamming the slide kick, which was brought up in the analysis, Khan getting cocky and that leading to him taking a massive hit, and the visually neat shot where Bison tries to brainwash Khan, who decides the most effective way to tell him to get fucked is with a swift punch to his jaw. This leads into more fighting game boss spam, which is to be expected, and the repetition of Khan's attacks gives Bison the window he needs to teleport away. Khan throws a spear and Bison teleports to where he already is to make it pass through him during the process, for no reason other than to flex that he can. Bison goes more on the offensive, Khan draws blood with his hammer, Bison gets some kinda janky looking aerial kicks that don't look like they hit, followed by a Psycho Crusher that's from a clearly different sprite sheet, but I'll live because his line as he stomps Khan into the dirt is really cool. I like Khan getting back up and taunting Bison without dropping his guard this time, and I like Bison getting his projectile spam reflected back at him. It feels like Bison's given the respect he deserves since his sucker punch hit Khan so hard that he realised, fuck, I probably shouldn't let him do that again, which makes him actively stay focused and avoid being hit wherever possible for the remainder of the battle. But I don't know about this bit here. Khan pinning him to a wall and pummeling his face in is neat in concept, but the violent screen shaking thinks this scene is way more dramatic than it actually is. The punches are super slow and the sound design does nothing to help them feel any more powerful than anything either of the two had done prior. Except for the kick that sends him crashing through a pillar, trapping him under another one as a callback to something from the analysis. Khan says flawless victory despite the fact that he's taken many hits though, immersion broken, I fucking hate this episode. Now Final Bison's been brought out, and you'd think this would be where the fight peaks, and it kinda does, for a little bit. I love the transformation scene with Bison bursting out of the rubble as ominous music plays, and the start to his segment of the fight is awesome. His Psycho Crusher feels super powerful even if he goes back to the other sprites where he has the red clothes, but shush. And I love his onslaught that Khan slowly adapts to, going from getting pummeled from all angles to starting to block some of the hits, to finding the right time to counterattack. And then the rest after that sucks. Khan uses the same elbow barge 4 times in a row, stomps on Bison, then hits him 4 times with his hammer. It's the exact same animation every single time, and while I appreciate the sound design getting more intense for each hit, it does nothing to make the scene less boring and repetitive. Final Bison really went down like a bitch in 5 hits, and it only took 5 more to knock him out of his Final Bison state and outright kill him. Khan tears him in half, which I would like more if the sprite didn't look so weird with his cape and hands floating beside his bottom half. But then Khan closes out with some, as Sidud so eloquently put it, Soulvore, to squash the argument that Bison would just possess him, and I like that. This gives him Psycho Power, which he shows in the epilogue shot, and that can only end so well. And the conclusion overall's fine, doesn't go into any stats, but that's to be expected from Season 2, covers the main points and how their abilities counter well enough, Khan would resist brainwashing and possession, he has way more experience, and he literally eats Bison's main power source to fuel himself. Overall, a pretty good episode, 7 out of 10. A huge improvement over Akuma vs. Sung in most ways, barring the death. I know I gave them the same scores, but this is on the much higher end of the 7 out of 10 range for me. I honestly could have given it an 8 if the ending didn't suck as much as it did, but what can you do? Oh, and the alternate ending exists as well. I'd only heard stories about it for years, but now that I've finally got a first membership, I got to watch it in all its glory, and it's better than the episode itself. 10 out of 10, I support these two settling down together. Hopefully Akuma vs. Khan tops both of these episodes, but I don't want to jinx anything.
No, the Satsui no Hado is
Faster than light. A speed boo has never had to combat before.
So, Akuma vs. Shao Kahn. There's quite a bit for me to say here, and for the analysis, it's mostly positive. They're both definite improvements over their previous outings on the show with better coverage of their stories and better jokes, at least in Akuma's case for the latter. I didn't find Khan's as funny as Against Bison, but I did still like the joke about the Mortal Kombat theme licensing rights, and the cutaway was solid. The cutaway in Akuma's section though, I don't know what to make of this, genuinely. It's one of those things where I am in such disbelief that it was even made at all that all I can do at the end is chuckle nervously. Like, it starts funny enough because of how cursed it is, then Boomstick begs Wiz to cover him in oil, and Wiz agrees with a smile on his face. What the fuck is going on? Boomstick will then mention Vor shortly after, and it feels like this entire episode is a fever dream. But the rest of his analysis having coverage of his last remnants of humanity, all these different crossovers, going into folklore regarding the Oni form, it's all enjoyable. Much like his first episode, Akuma steals the show in comparison to Khan's, and also compared to the animation. Okay, let's get this out of the way, I don't like the fight at all. I love the SFM team's other works with one exception, and that one exception being the only one of their previous 5 episodes where the fight is heavily focused on martial arts should probably be an immediate giveaway that maybe hand-to-hand choreography is not their strong suit. Still, there could have been other behind-the-scenes reasons like time constraints as to why the episode turned out the way it did, so I wasn't counting this one out right away. Then the preview came out and raised some red flags, but Link vs. Cloud did the same and that ended up being a banger episode. So maybe this one would turn out the same where it got better as it went along. I mean, I said how it didn't for me not even a minute ago, so yeah. It starts well with Akuma's Raging Demon being used on some random background NPC. The effects are nice, Akuma's model is the great one from Tekken 7, the track is setting up solid atmosphere, I'm liking it. And then it cuts to Shao Kahn, who is his fucking putrid Mortal Kombat 11 model that I genuinely cannot stand looking at, for fuck's sake. He towers over Akuma, which is a funny shot, and I like their first dialogue exchange, especially thanks to how amazing Philip Sacramento's performance as Akuma is. Not quite as good as his previous role as Yoda earlier this season, but it still captures exactly what I'd want in an Akuma voice. And Shao Kahn... Okay, I really like Gianni's works, I think he's very vocally talented. Hell, I want Duke Nukem to get an episode for no reason other than to hear Gianni voice him, but when a character's voice is as iconic as Shao Kahn's, it's really something you need to get right. And instead of being really deep and booming, he sounds like just some guy with a semi-deep voice. Well, I guess as long as the fighting itself is good I can look past that, but no, this has the worst SFM jank this side of the other mistake. I know it wasn't animated in SFM, but still, they're the SFM team. It doesn't start too bad, the hits here are fairly well animated, and I like how it keeps to a 2D plane to replicate the style of their home series, but the sound design doesn't make the hits feel nearly as meaty as they should. And that continues for the rest of the fight. Akuma's awful looking jump, Kahn smacking him away, the Go Hadouken that gets stopped with barely any effort. These characters above all else should feel absurdly powerful, and they just don't for most of the runtime. Kahn's telekinesis feels similarly weightless, but I do like the bit after where Akuma teleports behind him to escape, and lands probably the best combo of the fight while getting some more good lines. And then hitting Kahn with a Hadouken that gives a clearly not green screen smoke effect, why would you even say that? Kahn swings his hammer around, which gives us some of this fight's very limited environmental interaction. And that reminds me, why the fuck does this take place in the desert? In what way does barren, boring wasteland add anything to the fight? If anything, it just subtracts by giving us no means for cool environmental destruction to show the overwhelming strength these two have. Especially Akuma, who's generally more destructive with his strength, even if Kahn is stronger in a versus sense. I can excuse the first season for that, but not this one. Anyway, Kahn smacking Akuma with his hammer looks weak, and the light clank sound effect does not help that. Akuma getting launched across the sand looks hilarious, and Kahn pulls a Dr. Doom by reciting worse versions of dialogue from his old school games. It's made even worse by how it gives us a close-up of his disgusting, rancid character model. Please put a bag over his face or something. Akuma shows up in his Shin Akuma state. Sure, why not? I was hoping that both this and Oni would be included in the animation, and I'm happy they did. But also considering that Shin Akuma adds literally nothing as Kahn immediately turns the tables and bodies him with an X-ray, where you can clearly see the PNG overlaid on the first shot and the second doing what seems to be no actual damage, as well as his hair looking just better than Kahn's model, at least. I don't like this segment. Akuma's new form changes absolutely nothing, his attacks all feel slow and weightless, let's just get to Oni already. Okay, actually, no, let's not get to Oni. The switch in model styles here is so jarring, holy shit. The build up to the transformation's cool, Kahn gets an effect to his voice which makes him sound closer to how I would want him to sound. Akuma's line in response is fucking awesome, Sacramento once again gives a great delivery. Oni's eyes in the smoke build up anticipation really well, and I like this bit of the track well enough. I wish it was more heavy and intense to fit the monstrous nature of Oni, but I will take what I can get. It gets closer to that shortly after at least. So then, Oni himself looks like shit. Maybe not in a vacuum, but the Street Fighter IV model clashes hard with the MK11 one for Kahn, and especially the previous one that Akuma was using from Tekken 7. He gets an admittedly solid start to a rushdown on Kahn, who then after begins to no-sell him, okay. Oni's jump and the spear look fine, the Hadouken spam does not, neither does the effect of Kahn's reflector shield. Oni's face before getting blasted is funny as hell, the following bit of combat is jank to fuck, and I hate how the Shoryuken looks. The way they awkwardly motion between the models after the attack looks fucking awful. It does lead to one of my favourite shots of the fight though. The hole in Kahn's chest is a neat reference to him surviving that exact same thing in Mortal Kombat 9, and seeing Oni through that hole like in Shaun of the Dead is cool, even if the hole's perfectly round somehow, but I will survive. Then Akuma slowly and jankily goes for the Raging Demon, jankily knocks the hammer out of Kahn's hand, then begins to activate the move and cuts to that without us even seeing him land it. I do like the concept of Kahn overpowering Akuma during the Raging Demon, but I do not like that his helmet's been knocked off so I have to look at his revolting lizard man face. Kahn gets an okay line after catching Oni's hand, ruined by how they've decided to give a close-up of the worst character model they have ever used, and the kill is hilarious both in terms of the jank and Oni's expression work. They ruin a cool concept by having Kahn just casually bump Oni and smack him like he was hammering in a nail. not like he was putting his all into finishing someone who pushed him to his limit. And that's another one of the main issues that this fight faces. It feels like Akuma's getting bodied for most of it. Khan no-sells him even in his strongest form, constantly ragdolls him, and doesn't give a shit when Akuma punches a hole in his chest. The conclusion's solid at least, covering the strength gap fine enough while also saying that Khan is way faster without retreading the numbers, so he could avoid the Raging Demon. Then on top of that, they justify using Blaze's ending and why Khan wouldn't just taunt and let himself be hit. So, did I like this episode overall? Well, I like the analysis well enough, but I really do not like the fight. This is, unfortunately, my least favourite episode of the season, and that doesn't make me happy to say. The season was doing so well, so many episodes were great, and putting aside how much I bully the other low points, Lex vs Doom and Blake vs Mikasa were honestly not that bad. One of them I considered okay, and the other I consider just barely below the threshold for okay. Akuma vs Shao Kahn has become the first and hopefully only episode this season that I just outright can't fucking stand. I also like it way less than these characters' previous episodes. Obviously the production value is just objectively higher, that much goes without saying, but with my extra leniency towards the earlier episodes, coupled with them having less issues that bother me and being more enjoyable overall, yeah, I just like those ones way more. Well, the fight scenes anyway. The analysis here is way better than with Akuma vs Shang Tsung, and about on par with, if not better than Shao Kahn vs M. Bison. Now, the million-dollar question which I was really hoping I wouldn't have to ask myself this season. Do I like it more or less than Batgirl vs Spider-Gwen? Oh, more, without a shadow of a doubt. I like Batgwen's analysis more, granted, but Akuma vs Khan had a much less aggravating fight. They had similarly awful low points. In fact, I'd argue Akuma vs Khan is even worse in some aspects, like the model they use, Khan's vocal performance, and the set piece being boring as sin, but the difference is I can actually point to things I unironically like in this episode beyond, well, you didn't do this particularly well, but you also didn't fuck it up completely, so they'll take it. What score do I give it? Well, my gut feeling right now is a 3 out of 10. I really want it to go up to at least a 4 once it's had more time to sink in, but for now I just do not like it. Hopefully I'll like the next time? Oh, for fuck's sake. You know, when people pointed out, hey, it's been years since you went 3 episodes without Marvel or DC, they didn't mean, hey, please go without these series exactly 3 episodes in a row and then you can go back to your usual boring comic matches. I genuinely don't see what legacy this has. The connections, as far as I'm told, are very vague reincarnates with elemental-based powers who are women of colour. I know it's probably not how it was intended, but that last bit especially to me really comes across as saying that women of colour have so little going on other than their skin colour and gender that it makes them really similar, and that implication really rubs me the wrong way. Hell, they're not even the same race. Storm is African and Korra's Inuit, so that barely even works as a connection. That aside, the potential of the first good Avatar episode on Death Battle not involving Atla, instead being Korra getting fed to an Omega level mutant, doesn't sit right with me. Could they do cool stuff with it? Maybe. Do I care about it? Not in the least. Korra had far more interesting alternate options. If they really wanted to bring in another X-Men character, Magneto was literally right there. I do not get the significance of doing this in the big anniversary season. The one thing I am hoping this episode gives us is just a generally better track record for the X-Men. Wolverine and Cable's episodes were good, the rest were not that. Unless Deadpool vs Deathstroke counts, but I'm told it doesn't. So if Storm can even out that record with a 3rd good episode, I'd be perfectly happy with it. I know I just ragged on the matchup, but I don't actually have anything against these characters. Storm seems neat, Korra I don't know about, I haven't watched Legend of Korra yet, and while I love playing as her in Nick All-Star Brawl, that hardly speaks to how good of a character she is. At least with Storm I've seen her actually do stuff beyond being a fighting game moveset in the LEGO games, but that's neither here nor there. Sorry to end off on a sour note, but that is how Akuma vs Khan ends, so I guess it's fitting. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. It feels weird to dedicate one to a new episode that ended up being so overly negative. I've written this all up before Nem's even woken up to watch the episode, so I'm curious to see what he's gonna think. Speaking of which, he's probably doing his own version of this review, go watch that. All that's left is the highlight reel now, hope you enjoy that. I got nothing.
Yo, it's Shao Kahn!
He's my boy, I gotta go for him!
Symbolic of the infinite sky above and the one who stands before it.
Oh, he's opposed to... No, we can't even say that no more!
Gotetsu at an early age, Akuma was practically born into the ways of
okay, it's moved on, let's possess Akuma instead.
If I just turn in the Ryu bit into the Akuma bit, that's fine by me.
Yeah, you're just begging for a picture of someone dressed as Akuma eating disgusting spaghetti.
No.
Right, that's getting cut out.
That's going in! That's going in this week!
You know that comic frame of Akuma snapping that guy's neck? That's me to you, Max.
What did I do?
You've willed spaghetti eating Akuma feet pics into existence. That's what you've done.
Pretty good! Oh, base!
Oh no. Boomstick's gonna use the Satsui no Hado, I can feel it.
They're getting ready for a funny.
Oh, here we go! Funny
Boomstick's
time!
gonna
Funny
oil
time!
himself up.
Let me just push up! Oh no!
I was fucking choked on my fucking food. Seeing the lube.
Don't make that face!
Did you see the fucking puppy dog eyes he gave Wiz?
Alright, so I don't actually know who's gonna win now. Holy shit, let's go.
Dude, Shao Kahn, he's got the epic planet level shit.
No,
Dub, bye bye,
He
Akuma.
could bunch the planet stuff, you never know.
Wait till this. Oh my god! Akuma can win!
Fortunately,
It's just like
Goku
Ghost
knew
Rider.
exactly how to do that.
Exactly,
I don't
yeah,
remember if
Russian,
Shao
Russian.
Kahn has like multiple souls or not. I think I'm thinking of somebody
He's
else.
consumed like billions of them apparently.
Okay, so that he might
If it's the weight of
be
your
fine.
sins, if it's the weight of your sins, then he could kill Shao Kahn.
Well, I don't know if Shao can just use those souls.
But I'd never do that. Why did Akuma say that?
So they're giving him Shin and Oni. If they can work those both into the fight, I'll be impressed.
Akuma Blanco.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Oh, base.
Did they just reference Gohan Blanco?
Yeah, they did. I'm really liking this analysis.
I've barely heard any of it, but I agree.
Oh shit, Oni.
Can we please just get Thanos with the Satsui no Hado? Please give us a sequel to Marvel.
Isn't it literally part of Kage's story that he tries to go scare Sagat, and Sagat's like, fuck off, I'm not scared of you.
Oh, there he is.
There he is. Oh, he's so cute.
Wow, you know, seeing these right after each other, it is impressive how comparatively shitty MK looks compared to Street Fighter.
Oh yeah.
I do not like.
Better.
I like how Mortal Kombat 9 looks. I do not much care for how 11 looks, and I just hate that they're using MK11 Shao Kahn's model.
I like MK11 Shao Kahn's design in some aspects, but just the overall look of it with like graphics, it's ugly.
Right, Boomstick just said the word MILF, and I'm just done.
Why wouldn't he say it?
Are you surprised?
Biff, it's better than him saying Big Mommy Milkers.
So we saw Boomstick pull out a tub of lube and then make puppy dog eyes at Wiz.
I have already repressed that from my
Please, let me
memory.
lube
Why do you
myself
have to
up,
bring
please.
that
I want to
up?
lube myself up, Wiz.
I really liked last year's movie. I have not seen this year's animated movie yet, though.
I'm not particularly into these animated NK movies, but they look cool.
Shovel? It's Shovel! I love Shovel!
Oh, for the bit, guy, for the bit. It's ironic.
Yes, it's ironic. It's ironically funny, guys.
Shao Kahn's famous quote, it was ironic, guys, I swear. Listen, Biffweed, Sonya Blade beat Cammy Wyatt. That's impressive, come on now.
Oh, no, here we go.
Planet level Shao Kahn. Planet level Shao Kahn. Let's go. Epic.
Okay, so Shao Kahn is faster. Oh no!
Oh, let's get it, Khan.
I don't mind test your might stuff as much as some people, but like it did get repetitive. Yeah, Goro, who's never met Cabal, scales to Cabal, the guy whose whole shtick is being faster than everyone. That checks out.
I am Khan of
I'm Khan! I'm Khan!
Shao Kahn. Why is he on the left?
Ooh.
Why is Shao Kahn on the left? What?
Shao Kahn, stay
My emotion.
Please, Akuma, please.
Alright guys, shut the fuck up, the fight's starting. Get ready for the Shao Kahn W.
They didn't give Khan a voice filter, goddamn.
What if instead of I want to take her live, Akuma said I want to take her Tesco's meal deals?
New stuff after this shot.
No, it's just gonna one shot.
I'm here.
Yeah, and there's Akuma's dash.
Yeah, what that is balloon to pieces later.
I'm just giving it up.
Yo, okay.
Nice.
I love this Akuma voice, okay.
I don't know how I felt about that smoke effect.
Yo, it's me, Donovan. I'm in the sky
He
right
said
now.
it. I said it.
Wait, he said I am Khan?
Oh.
Shit, Akuma. Ooh, Shovel.
Ooh, he's doing the bit, he's doing the ironic bit.
Yo! Go, Akuma! Akuma is carrying this animation hard.
He is, oh my god.
Come on, please. Oh. What the?
I am liking this so far, but it's not perfect.
The fact that Shao Kahn's not even flinching at these punches.
Yeah, Akuma's kind of getting bodied right now, which makes me think he's gonna win, I hope. Look, Kahn's gonna keep going because he's survived this shit before.
Oh shit!
Do it! Do it! Do it!
What? No!
No! Oh, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on!
Oh no!
No!
Become a dragon! Become a stupid fucking dragon!
Oh my god. Ah.
You
literally got
Okay, flawless victory. You got a hole in your chest. That was not a flawless victory.
Flawless victory! I didn't get hit once!
Kana's falsely declared a flawless victory in both of his episodes, for fuck's sake. Yeah.
They barely made it seem like Akuma was even kind of hurting him.
It's Homelander Omni-Man. It's either Homelander Omni-Man or Magneto Tetsuo. There's no other potential.
Okay, admittedly, I liked that animation mostly, but that death was kind of funny.
The winner.
Yeah, that was definitely not my favorite of the season, but it was okay.
Right, here we go.
So let's see what's going on here.
Come on. Right, rip the band-aid off Homelander.
Omni-Man vs Homelander, let's go, let's go. Omni-Man vs
Homelander, Omni-Man.
Hey, that's pretty good.
First time.
Oh
Are you kidding me?
Yeah!
Why? That's not even like, oh, funny man, that's just boring.